Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. First item on the agenda is to receive any apologies for absence and any substitute members.
Yep, so we've got apologies from Councillors Ainsley, Alvey and Evans. Substitutes, Councillor Glover and Councillor Iyengunwena.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Pen's chosen a great time to stop working. Thank you. Item 2 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the 7th of October. Does anyone have any questions or clarifications? Are we happy to accept those? Can I have a show of hands? Wasn't there? I'll sign those in a minute. Item 3, next item is the declaration of interest. Are there any items to declare in any of the topics this evening? Take that as no. Question 39 and 40, I guess, public question time and member question time.
Yes, no public or member questions.
Great. Okay, on to the main agenda items. So tonight we're looking at the children's services and adult social care budgets. There are a number of specific papers on this in the pages 13 to 108. Just in introducing this, as we pass over to officers and to our exec colleagues to run us through this, I think it would be most helpful if, when you have questions, if you can help identify the page that you're referring to. I think to give us much help to be able to identify the sections we want to talk about. What I'd like to try and do is take these in order as we go through, and then if there's questions at the end, we'll come back. But first of all, I'd like to welcome our colleagues and welcome officers here this evening. Who are we looking at to go first on the agenda? Prue, is that to you, or is David to you, or are we Matt?
I think in the agenda, I think we're going to do adults and then children's, if that's perfect. If that's all right. And
yep.
In the pack, you'll see, and we'll follow the pack. So I'll talk. I'm on page 17 at the moment. We'll do a little bit of a kind of overview, scene setting, and then we'll go through the summary of the bids. I think they go revenue, growth, savings, special items, and then capital. We'll just run through the summary, and then all the detailed bids are in there. So we'll then take questions, I think, if that's all right, on adults, and then children. We'll follow the same pattern for children. So
absolutely fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Go ahead.
I'll introduce, shall I, David? Yes. So I suppose just by way of overview. So I'm on page 18 of the agenda. Just look at the page numbers. Adult social care budget, net budget is 67 million, or just a bit over 67 million. So it's about 40% of the council's revenue budget. So a sizable budget. And I've just got a few stats around activity, which just give you a kind of sense of how that touches residents. So last year, 4,780 new requests for support from the department. That's up 22% on the year before. That's requests from residents. 2,500 residents with long-term care packages, up 12% on the year before. 2,159 short-term bits of service for residents, up 5%, and just a shade over 2,000 safeguarding concerns, up 19% on the year before. So it just gives you a feel for the sort of size and number of residents touched by the budget. As you will see, each of those percentages are quite a large jump up, and that is reflective of, I suppose, demographics and adult social care in general. Year on year, we're seeing more people needing adult social care support, and those needs of those people increasing. That makes managing the budget really tricky in our current climate of funding. A kind of rough sort of rule of thumb, each year in terms of more people and more need. It's about 3.5% of growth a year, just to meet those new people, all those extra needs in the year. That's about 2.37 million pounds. So every year we have to try and find savings in order to balance the budget, and I'll work through that. Across adult social care, over the last five years of budget, we've saved about £9.57 million in order to make ends meet, and we have a track record of being around about on budget, given the size of the budget year on year. So I think the next bit of context I just wanted to whip through with you, if you go to page 21, are just some risks around the budget. So we've put these budget proposals together because we think they are what we need to continue to run a good level of service for next year, but we are in a kind of uncertain times. Now, I've talked a bit about rising need, volumes and complexities, but we are also, as a department, just going through a CQC inspection, so we've got a lot of pressures, kind of operational pressures on top, which makes it tough to also focus on some of those savings measures. And the other bits which are also tricky are we have lots of grants in our budget. You'll see an income line in that. There's grants from the government, and they tend to be year on year, quite short-term funding. So that's an issue for us because we're assuming they're going to roll over. That's about £2 million worth of are we going to get that? Aren't we going to get that? And we have to wait for the budget to find out, and sometimes it can go later, can go sort of March or time before April, and that's an issue for us. The other major issue for adult social care is about 80% of our costs are staffing. It's hands-on care pretty much, either directly provided by us or commissioned by us, and those care workers, frontline care workers, are in and around minimum wage in terms of salary, and wages going up, or minimum wage going up, has quite a huge impact on the budget. There are lots of different stats around that, but pretty much a kind of 2% increase in the adult social care budget is about 1% on council tax alone. So it gives you a kind of order of magnitude there. So we are quite vulnerable to minimum wage going up and then not being able to get the funding that we need for that, or the grant funding not following to support that. And I suppose the final thing then is, I think you will all have heard successive governments have tried to find long-term solution for adult social care funding and have backed away from that. And we really do need to find a solution for that in our country. We're kind of going year to year, hand to mouth a little bit with budgeting, and that every year that gets harder and harder to manage on the coalface, and we really do need to get to grips with that.
And
cool.
also, we complain a bit about the minimum wage going up and not getting any extra funding, but then it's right that the minimum wage goes up because these people who do very, very important jobs are badly paid, to be quite honest. And we want to give them as much as we can, but then if we don't get the funding to do it, it's a catch-22 situation. So I think that's very important, because I don't regret that minimum wage goes up, but I regret that we don't get any more despite it going up, and therefore we have to pay more. And I think that's important to remember.
Okay, thank you, David. Yeah, so that hopefully that gives you just a bit of a sense of size and context of the budget. So I'll now move through the summary tables, and I'll just briefly present them, and then we'll open out to questions. So I'm on page 23 now, if people are able to follow that, and that just gives the top level summary of the adult social care revenue budget. You can see expenditure, income, net budget, and then you can see the overall bids for this year. Savings 2.3 million, growth 2.1 million. So net growth is a slightly shrinking budget overall, although you'll see that is offset by a grant that's been treated as a saving. You'll see that as you come further down. And special items are one-off funding of £500,000. So moving on to the savings. I suppose, well, I don't know, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but the budget, the adult social care budget is not full of brand new bids and ideas. It's very much keep doing the things that we've been doing for a number of years. So you won't see lots of brand new bids with different ideas in here. It's very much, this is what we did last year, this is a refine of that, and this is where we are for this year. So anyway, just whipping through the savings, we have the largest saving target, which is £720,000 around demand management, and that is a suite of projects where we are reviewing existing care packages using technology to increase independence. So, okay. And quite a lot of initiatives in there. Another one is where we have OTs that help reduce the need for two carers and through training and having one carer. So it just gives you a sense of how we manage some efficiency demand through those programs. Where it says Learning Disability Review, that's basically, some of you will know, we won an MJ Award for work we did to provide accommodation in the borough for people with learning disabilities. We've got a rolling programme there. What that means is that we can meet those needs of those people in our borough and not have to pay out of area expensive placements, and that drives some efficiency there. And the other savings in there are to do with the use of grant funding to support hospital discharge. So we're using grant funding there, and then we've got health income. So that's making sure residents are getting access to the right levels of health income to pay for their needs in the community. Social care tends to be the sort of safety net for people in terms of paying for care and support in the community. But if there are health needs in there, we need to make sure the NHS are meeting their statutory duties to meet those needs as well. So driving more income that way helps balance the budget.
In the past, it hasn't been that easy to get that money from health, but they're starting to realise that we're being serious. Hopefully.
That's true. So we're on page lost my 25 because I can't see that in the margin. So that's growth. So the growth bids, care and support, complexity. So that's just our predictions of more people and more needs, as I described before, year on year. That makes up the lion's share of that. And then we have 100,000 a year, and each year we use that money to invest in the voluntary sector, and that helps pick up people with low-level social care needs and prevent them from needing to come to the council. And we have a whole suite of, we spend about just a bit north of £2 million in that space, and we try and do a bit more of that year on year. So that's what that growth bid is for. Special item of £500,000 is largely made up of staffing, and that's the staffing capacity that we need to have the capacity to deliver that to £2.3 million worth of savings year on year. So that's revenue and capital. The only new capital bid this year is £1 million for next year, and then £1 million for the following year to refurbish Suffolk Lodge. Suffolk Lodge is I'm going to say much loved, because it is care home in Wokingham, but it is in need of refurbishment and investment to keep the building up to scratch. So that's a new bid essentially to do that. The other bids are bids that have followed through from previous years. So community equipment, you may or may not know, but we have a statutory duty year on year to provide equipment. So things like grab rails, raised bath seats, that sort of thing. And we have that every year, that bid each year. I think we have slightly increased that this year, and that's to keep up with demand, but it also makes good economic sense to do that, or good budgetary sense to do that, because the more independent you can keep people, the better it is for them, and it means needing to put less staff in, which is more costly. Adult social care transformation, so that is linked to that savings target that I talked about. That's about generating a supply of specialist accommodation in the borough so that we can meet the needs of housing needs of people who need specialist accommodation in the borough, so that we don't need to go further away in terms of finding care arrangements for those people. Always a struggle that, in that we have a programme around that, but there's always a need for more housing all the time. And then the other two bids are, there's a little bit of section 106 money, which is used to support the WIP, so the Wokingham Integrated Partnership Board. That's where we work locally with GPs and health services together. So some of you will know about that, some of you won't. And then a small maintenance and refurbishment budget, and that's for largely the care homes that we run. That's a kind of annual maintenance budget for that. I think I'll just get into the page. That's the summary position of all the bids. So we will. We seem to have lost the chair.
I've asked Neil to go and check whether he's okay. He's recently been in hospital, and so he may not be feeling great.
Oh, apologies. I was rattling through, so I was just carrying on. So sorry about that. But I think we're open to questions around the bid now.
Is there any questions? Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Matt. I think I ask this question every year, but just so I'm clear, page. When you're looking at growth or savings, are those figures cumulative?
Which one are you, table are you particularly looking at?
Well, it should all be the same, presumably. Yeah.
Cumulative, I think, is the answer to that.
So if you're growing by 2 million in 25-26, you're growing by 3.7 million more in 26-27. Is that right?
No, growth is 2 million and then 4.1 million. So it's 2 million, 2.1 million this year, and then another 2 million-ish the year after to make 4.1.
Okay.
Okay. See what I mean?
Yeah. So, yeah, sort of. Yeah. Well, it's not the growth in that year; it's the total growth over the. Yeah.
So I'm not
Thank you. I ask that every year and it always confuses me.
yes, it is an annual. It's just the way it's done from a finance point of view.
Well, confusingly, yeah.
Yeah.
The second the second question I had was about dolls and mental health. Why is there nothing in 25, 26?
Oh, because I've got one-off, you know, the special item, the one-off money there, I can use that money to get that started in that year. And that really was to just dampen down the overall growth needed in order to help with the 151 officer and the balancing of the budget. So those staff for increased Dole's assessment and the mental health OTs, that reablement, we'll recruit them next year with one-off money, and then that will become permanently baked into the budget the following years in the MTFP.
And a final question from me is about the care home. Where does the benefits of that show?
The care homes, I suppose. You mean Bluebell and Suffolk Lodge?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose in the ability to stay within the budget envelope that we've got, if we didn't have our own homes, we'd have to purchase at a higher amount in the market. So I would have to either whack up the growth or dial down the savings.
It'd be useful to be able to understand the investment versus the savings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's possible.
I mean, yes, we have business cases for that. So
If we could see them, that'd be
yeah,
great.
yeah, for sure. It's just that this is about, you know, specific bids in the MTFP.
Yeah, no, I'm just interested because otherwise it's fine you're bidding for something, but it might not actually be sensible business case depending on what the business case is. And what happened to Towetley?
You mean the new build care home? So we got to a place where the costs, because of construction and the site and inflation in construction costs, the costs got very high. We then had the opportunity to purchase Bluebell. So we are acquiring care homes where we can. That's our strategy, rather than a new build from scratch. And that's because of the business case, and also from an operational point of view, it gives me beds sooner.
So when you share the business case, presumably there'll be a comparison with what would happen if you did a new one, or what would happen if you didn't do it at all?
We certainly have all of that. We're trying to remember whether that was all in one business case or separate ones. I'm not sure, but for sure.
Stuart will certainly have that.
He does. Stu does. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Ask a question? Anybody?
Yeah, okay. Question is on page 25. I was just wondering, with the supposed changes in demographics of people getting older, just wondering why the relative change in percentage from 2026 to 2027 to 2027, 2028 is less than 2025 to 2026, 2027. In terms of percentage, it should be going up, even though the absolute difference looks like 1,700.
Yes, I see what you mean. What you're saying is, and again, because it's cumulative, it's confusing. I'm trying to do the subtraction sum, but what you're saying is, it's not 2, 4, 6. So the growth is dampening a bit. Yeah. I think that's a good question. In that. That's our best prediction based on what we know is happening in the borough at the moment. But I would say each year, because years 2 and 3 are further away, we always refresh our predictions on that. So I think you're right. If we look over 5, 10, 15 years, the growth is just going to be steady, steady, steady. It's just those are our best predictions, and behind that there's all spreadsheets about, because it's not just older people. This is people with learning disability, people coming, transitioning from children to adults as well. So I think that's my best answer. We have to keep it under review.
And certainly, I mean, the number of older people obviously goes up, but people with learning disability, it stays fairly constant. I mean, it's one of the highest in the country, but it does stay fairly constant, throughout the time. And certainly, people with learning disability are living an awful lot longer now than they were even 20 years ago. And so, but that is something, so they keep on. So, in fact, there is some growth there.
I think the other bit to answer your question then is it's worth looking at the total cumulative growth along the bottom, because I think what the separating out the need for additional Dole's assessment workers and mental health is sort of separating that out from the number above, so some growth, because that's staffing growth, is wrapped up there. So it's worth looking at the number along the bottom, I think, in total.
Sorry, Moses, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I was asking the question because yesterday they were saying that the birth rate is declining, and we're having more older people than young people, which would tend to suggest that the percentage of adult social care should be going up over time and not reducing.
I think that's generally true. It's just that our calculations are not seeing that sort of jump up over the next 3 years, but it is a steady step growth every year. So I think any longer term view you take, the numbers are quite alarming in terms of how that looks, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll be one of those numbers.
I'm not commenting. Just before we go to Dave online, apologies for running out of the room. As some of you know, I recently had some surgery and it's still trying to get used to my new body. So my apologies. And Matt, it wasn't a commentary or view of your entry to the presentation, so don't take it personally. Dave online.
Thank you, Mark. We talked about the savings, and you said there are a number of measures that have been put in place, sort of using technology, automation, etc., to save money, which is really good. Would it be possible to sort of have a list of those projects and what the estimated savings are and how we expect those to happen, so that we can assess how successful or unsuccessful they've been? Because that would be really useful to see. And it's not a case, I accept some projects may not be as successful as anticipated, but it's just assessing how successful those have been and whether we should move more in those directions or not.
Short answer is yes. Yes, we can provide that. One of them, when we talk about technology in adult services, that's more about technology that can go into people's homes to keep them as independent as possible, and therefore not requiring as much paid for carers, essentially. And that's what drives efficiency there. We've got a very successful tech team. I think they did about 450 assessments alongside our teams and bits of equipment into people's homes. So that's just one example, but we can definitely, I can't see Dave, but we can provide a list.
Thank you very much. You're not missing much by not seeing me, don't worry.
A voice from above. It's the voice of Dave appearing through the ether. Dave, anything else from you?
No, that was good. Thank you very much.
Great. Any more questions around the room? If not, move on. Moving on. Where do we want to go to next?
I think we're over to children's
Emma?
services. Yeah,
So in terms of the children's overall budget, children's services, obviously there's a lot of moving parts in relation to children's services budget covering children's social care and education, with an overall total net of 42 million. There are, just in terms of just setting some of the context, so we have seen a doubling in terms of children requiring EHCPs in the last 5 to 6 years. And numbers of children in care have remained relatively stable. We currently have 129 children in our care, although our numbers of care leavers are set to double inside of the next 2 to 4 years. And the number of children subject to a child protection plan, again, remains relatively stable, though that's climbing slightly, and that's reflective of some analysis that we're currently undertaking in terms of what looks to be an approximate 10% growth in terms of the numbers of children who are being referred for statutory social work support. And within that, so at any one time, we have approximately 800 children that we are supporting in the borough in terms of requiring that level of support. Just as an overview, we have 55 primary schools in the borough, we have 10 secondary schools and 3 special needs schools and 2 pupil referral units. In terms of the overview of kind of risks and issues impacting on children's services budgets nationally, the picture remains quite challenging. We're as yet unclear, although we may get some greater clarity tomorrow, in terms of kind of the direction, but there are indications that the reform agenda that was introduced by the previous government is going to be continued, but may take a slightly different shape as we go forward. We are engaged in lots of activity in terms of trying to address some of the concerns that there are, the national concerns in relation to market pressures, in relation to children's placements. And we have been making some good progress over this past year and are wanting to continue to drive that forward in terms of increasing our own in-house capacity, which means that we can keep children local to their communities and reduce some of the costs associated with travel costs, both in terms of children's placements and homes, but also equally in terms of schooling and education. You will be aware that children's social care was inspected in 2023 and was found to be requires improvement. So there is still a level of improvement activity that requires further enhancement. and again, looking at our capacity, our capability and responsiveness. And similarly to adult colleagues, looking at how advances in technology can support us in terms of meeting some of our saving requirements over the forthcoming years. Our biggest pressures in terms of budget are in relation to placements for children who are cared for by us and for whom we are a corporate parent for, but also in terms of the home to school transport budget. These are statutory duties, and we have increased, I think, our rigour and oversight, particularly in the last year, but there's still some further work to do in relation to supporting that progress continue. We are seeing increased numbers of children identified as having additional needs within the Wokingham area. So looking at our models of support for children with disabilities, and also noting that there is a national funding gap in relation to the costs associated with caring for our children who are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We've been engaged in quite a lot of activity to support those children and reduce our costs. But those costs we are seeing associated with increased costs in terms of supporting care leavers, for which we're not funded for at the appropriate levels in terms of supporting those younger people as they transition to becoming our care leavers. So just in terms of an overview of our overall savings and growth, you will see in terms of the net cumulative position, and I think this is probably similar to presentation to the way it has been presented in adults. So looking at an overall net, we've got some ambitious savings targets as we and you will be seeing some of the detail in relation to that within the bids in terms of transforming services. So within the next year of 1.96 million, and then that accumulates over the forthcoming years. But again, similar to our adult colleagues, we will be reviewing as we get closer to future years in terms of those particular savings and growth. In terms of the overview of the areas of our savings, which we are currently engaged in looking at, are linked to building a permanent workforce. So we have, similarly to other areas, experienced some challenges in terms of being able to rely on permanent social workers and have had to rely on locums. We've made really, really good progress in the last year in relation to reducing our overall reliance on locums from what was at the outset of the year looked at approximately 30% of our workforce to now 18%. And that has been linked to kind of an enhancing of the offer for our social workers and making a pipeline of trainees. So we've introduced apprenticeships, we've got students now with us. So we're not just looking at kind of where we are now, we're also forecasting forwards in terms of what we're going to need in the future. As I said, we have been investing in care leaver accommodation and bringing children closer to home. and again are making very good progress, but need to continue, particularly in view of that doubling of the number of care leavers that I spoke about earlier. One of the focus of the children's social care reforms is really about trying to and seeking to maintain children residing in their own families and within their own family networks. Looking at how we can invest in models that support children to remain within their own family networks. And we are also, similar to our adult colleagues, we've got a whole programme of work around securing health income for children with particularly complex needs. And historically, we have not been able to achieve significant contributions, but with some of the work that we have been doing and working with our ICB colleagues, that is moving to a much better position, which ultimately means much better outcomes for children because they're getting the right support from the right service at the right time. In terms of some of the changes that we brought about in terms of our home to school transport policy and changes in respect of how we commission home to school transport and reprocurement, we look and are looking to make savings in respect of that budget going forward. Again, linked to the introductions of technology and savings, looking at that overall efficiencies in terms of the scaffolding and support for children's services that's linked to transforming children's services for the future, particularly looking at performance reporting and the overview there in terms of really being able to track children's progress. In terms of areas of growth, you'll have seen the bids in the pack. So just as a summary and overview, looking at, again, the investment that we need in terms of building a permanent social workforce. So linked to that improved offer, it's looking at how we support our social workers across their career. And again, that's linked to some of the specific recommendations in the reform of children's social care. We're looking at how we invest in our home to school transport. So that is looking at the use of personal travel budgets, but also travel training and moving towards that model. And we've seen some success, both in terms of financials, but also children's outcomes in being able to, so we want to grow that and believe that will kind of both support children and also the longer term financial sustainability. And we are looking at new models of support for children with disabilities. So we have a statutory duty to provide short breaks, but there's further work that we need to do in terms of being able to have a fully fledged model of support for children with disabilities. And then in future years, should the trajectory remain the same in terms of the numbers of underage children arriving into the country, because of the model that we have in terms of the national transfer scheme, looking at how we can build that into budgets in future years, but not in this forthcoming year. And then again, looking at how we seek to reduce overall. Wokingham has a probably one of the lowest levels of children looked after in the country per 10,000 of head of the population, but there's always more that we could do. But also within the children who are in our care, we're needing to implement some models in terms of reducing escalating need, so the need for more expensive type provision in terms of managing children's needs and responding to children's needs at ever earlier points. And then overall, with the direction of travel around placement costs and the significant increases that we've seen over the previous few years, we anticipate that without something quite significantly being done differently at a national level, that will continue to rise. And with our special items, there's a real focus in relation to really trying to shift the dial to focusing on preventative support for families. So recognising that although it's hard to cost what you prevent, actually there is some really good research and evidence about some longer term studies about what works for children and families in terms of investing particularly in early years and early support for families when they are at the point of requiring further support. So looking at how we can look at investing in that programme. The overall transformation programme within children's services, there are always new programmes that we're needing to respond to, both at kind of local and national level, and how we're establishing effective partnerships to support us in that. And we're also looking at our specifically around how we review our legal costs and linked to the review of our joint legal team in terms of that transformation piece, which is why that's kind of front-loaded in this forthcoming year, recognising that we need to establish whether we are getting best value in respect of that work. Our education systems, so again, looking at some of the IT and computer systems that we need to invest in terms of being able to deliver support for children requiring additional support, and front-loading some of the transformation piece, particularly and specifically in relation to the implementation of Power BI. And the infrastructure that requires in terms of moving to a different model of oversight.
Before we go into capital, I sort of have three or four words on where we are, because what you can see in here, I mean, if you look, for example, at homeschool transport, it's both a saving and a growth item. We can save in one bit and we have to spend money in the other bit. And there are several items that are a bit like that. What I would say about homeschool transport, it's on the agenda for children's services over in Scrutiny in January to look at, to review the whole thing, but also particularly to look at the travel training and that angle of it. And we've started that. It's going really well, but it's early days, I think, but we've got some very interesting user experience, I think we'll call it, to see how it's actually transforming some young people's lives. And you know, it is early days, but it's working. The other thing I would say is that the transformation work that's going on and the investment in the IT and the Power BI and the performance management stuff is absolutely critical, because in a way, not so much in the last year, but before that, we've been flying blind in a lot of things, and to actually have the information to hand and to be able to interpret it and to get information as opposed to bits of data and to link it all up is really properly transformational, and it's where we're trying to get to. So we'll be able to judge things much better, to see what the impact of things are on young people and whether it's making the improvements that we need to do, because we do have to focus on the outcomes for the young people, and not just the money we're spending. And we're doing a lot of things which will come on to the capital, which are impacting on the revenue as well, which are helping us to keep that revenue cost down. Similarly to the question I think that was asked of Matt about the children's home, the care homes, and what impact does that have on your revenue. This is a similar thing. All the things that we're putting in place to try and reduce the overall revenue budget. So we'll come on to the capital. There's an awful lot more capital in children's than there is in adults. Yeah.
Which I probably won't do justice in a summary, but you have a page in...
Page 39 it starts.
Yeah, that provides just a summary overview. You will see probably that just in terms of the education spend is predominantly from grant funding, and the general fund is largely funding that investment in relation to the children's social care spend. But a total children's services total allocation of 25.3 million in 25-26, and then reducing, but again that would need to be subject to review. Some of this represents carry forward from previous projects, but you'll see a large chunk of the capital spend, so 7.2 million is focused on high needs capital programs. So and that's linked to some of the spend that we are accumulating in relation to children with additional needs and needing to provide in a different way, and create a space within our education sort of ecosystem to support children with specifically with additional needs. So looking at new resource hubs and SEN hubs within our existing suite of schools. Also, you'll be aware from previous years, just in terms of the money that is being invested in sixth form expansion, and then and also in terms of a one form entry expansion at the Pigott secondary school. We anticipate the population bulge, if you like, for children is going to be in years sort of 27, 28 and 29 within secondary. But we think largely with where we're at the moment, although we are remodelling and reviewing that, that we have sufficient space within secondary. But going forward, what it currently looks like is that we've got quite a significant surplus opening up within our primary school, linked to, I think, your comment earlier, just in terms of that falling birth rate. So again, doing some work to look at where we have spaces and reviewing that in terms of that future decision making around our schools, where SEND resource bases could best be placed in terms of trying to come to some creative solutions around the gaps in our primary school stock. I think,
just like it occurs to me that some people might not know what FFE stands for. So basically it's furniture and equipment and things. It's not building bits of, it's left over from previous budgets. So it's the tail end of, we've opened a new school, and it's not that new now anymore in Arborfield, and that's just the tail end of the spending that's been carried forward. And similar with Matthews Green and so on. So it's not, we're not building more things. What I do think is important is that we are bringing Seaford Court back into use. Seaford Court was it's in Westcott Ward. It's a building that was previously used for young people and has been left empty because it had some problems, which meant it wasn't really designed for today's regulatory standards. And so it's being remodelled and brought back into use, and hopefully will help us with the care leaver accommodation. Well, not hopefully, it will.
We will.
Yes, it's been a while coming because I think there's covenants and things on it, which mean it's been difficult. We had to make sure that the use was compatible with what was historically allowed, so it's taken a bit of time, but it's been empty for quite a few years and boarded up, but it's good to see it coming back in. But unless we do projects like that, the number of care leavers coming through the system will be very difficult to handle, because as we take particularly the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, as they come through, and we're about 35, 36 at the moment at any one time. Yeah. Our maximum number is 41. The government will ask us to try and
be at that number consistently.
As they age out, they remain our responsibility until they're 25. And so as one comes out, another one comes in, and so we've got the 18 to 25s is growing all the time, and it's quite a challenge to find someone for them all to go. They're not all in the borough, and some of them never see the borough at all, but that's diminishing, and actually they feel like, the general impression is they feel like they want to belong. They've been allocated to us, they feel like they belong with us. So it feels quite comfortable. That's not what local authorities used to think. They used to think that it didn't matter, you just allocated this person and they didn't want to belong because they'd just been randomly allocated to you. But actually, the young people have been telling local authorities they want somewhere to belong. And so we're quite happy to have them belong to us, and providing more accommodation for them locally not only means they do belong, but, and that fits in lovely with the community vision, but also that we can control the quality of the accommodation and have better oversight of them, because we have to have links with them to make sure they're okay, and it's much easier to have a link with somebody who's local to you than it is to pursue them to the other end of the country. Although I gather one has recently moved to Jamaica, which is one of our care leavers, which is very nice for him. If you go outside, you'll see their photography exhibition outside. There's a lovely picture of him on the beach in Jamaica. So, yes.
Do councillors get to escort in
Jamaica? Jamaica, you know.
No.
I think if you've had any involvement with being having to leave somewhere where you were,
yes.
Which my family had in the past, arriving somewhere and wanting to belong is a very strong emotion, yes. And they could be a real asset to the country.
Yes, we're feeling quite pleased at the way this is going at the moment. Yes.
Anything else, or should we move on to questions? But thank you for that. It's a long list. Pauline.
Thank you. Sorry, this is a bit of a long list as well. You said, I just wanted to understand it. You said care leavers were doubling in the next 2 to 4 years. But you also said the children in care is stable. How do those two go together?
So particularly if we're looking at our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, so when we look at the profile of our children in our care, that we have higher numbers coming in later in their teens. So what we've got is almost like a concertina of numbers of children moving through to being young people with care leaving status. So hence the increase. They age out much quicker.
So it's a shorter duration?
Yes.
But the same amount of people?
Yeah.
Yes.
at any one time.
Yes.
So safety valve, 23 million. I seem to remember. Where does that come in, these figures? How much have we had?
Right.
Where is it?
Oh, okay. Safety valve is not. It's not really in these figures because it's in the dedicated schools grant, which is a completely separate budget from the Children's Services main budget. However, it does impact on the council, so maybe shall I start and you can follow up when I go on.
Well, maybe we could just have a separate sheet on safety valve or on the DSG. I don't know.
On the DSG, you can have one. I'm happy to spend a minute or so just explaining now where we are with it. So the agreement we reached with the government was for a 6-year programme where at the end of the 6 years they would have written off half of our projected deficit at that point, and we would have to cough up for the other half. And that's the general pattern of them. So when we made the agreement, we got just over 8 million. That was in March 23. And we have to do reporting to them regularly throughout the year. And each time we do a report, provided they accept the report, we get a bit more knocked off the deficit. So it's not actual growth, it's not actual growth, it's knocking the deficit figure down. And so far, all our reports have been accepted and we've got all the money. And the last one was quite recent. It was about 600,000, was it? Yeah, it's about 1.8 million a year for the after the first year, when we started, it was 8 million. Then it's about 1.8 million a year until the last year when they write the rest off. That's the projection. We don't know whether that's going to work. We're doing a lot of work on it. Certainly, the things we put in place are reducing the upward thing, but it's not a flat thing, so it's not coming down so far quite as quickly as we would have hoped.
No. So there are indications that had we done nothing, it would be far exceeding where we are now. There's about 14 programmes that are we are working on in relation to rebalancing the system.
So I think if everybody agrees, an extra sheet on safety valve would be useful just to show the underlying growth and then what safety valve is taking off it, because obviously it's stopping it doing that and making it do something more like that.
It is worrying because there's at the moment that deficit doesn't sit on the council's books. It's in a separate place due to the ministerial override. That ministerial override should have stopped in 2023. It didn't because they realised the consequences of doing that. It's now due to end in 2026. And we need some certainty about what's going to happen because recent survey by the County Councils Network and the LGA, they got 74 responses from county councils mainly, so it doesn't include us. A quarter of them would go bust within a year after the overrides, and another quarter within 3 years. So
it's unlikely to go.
It's unlikely that any sane government would do nothing and allow that to happen. I just can't see that happening. What they will choose to do, I don't know, because the National Audit Office reported last week a big piece on Send, which basically says the system is unsustainable financially and has to be changed. And I think everybody recognises that, but whether it's possible in the current situation, I don't know. But unless something major happens, every council in the country just about is going to be...
So I've got a few more detailed questions. The Rook's Nest Farm, you've got capital in there. I thought it was an academy. What's that all about?
We have a liability, again, correct me if I get this wrong, the DFE is paying for the schools, but there's always a bit about building the access and the things which becomes the local authorities. I forgot what they call it. Do you know what it's called? No, but it's not. It's a liability for creating the site so that it works to put the school on it. If you see what I mean. So some of the utility stuff or that kind of things, or making sure the access road, the mouth of the access road is suitable, and all those kind of things, and that's our liability in there.
Okay. And then you've got phase 1, 2, 3, whatever. Do we know where those are yet?
Well, 2 of them are open.
No, under sorry, it says new secondary send unit, but it doesn't say where. A new primary SRP, and I don't even know what SRP is.
Yes, no,
39.
page 39. So there's some that are identified which are already opened,
Yeah.
and the other ones are,
Still
I think,
in
they're in negotiation.
Yes.
That's probably
So you're not announcing those yet?
no.
Right, okay.
No, we are making progress.
And what's an SRP?
Send resource special resource provision. That's what it stands for. Yes.
Okay. And
HI is hearing impaired. In case you.
no, I got that one.
Right.
And the Send Hub in Wokingham Town Centre. Just a general question: why is it Wokingham? Is that where the need is? Is that where there is most need, or is there going to be an implication on transport of having a Send Hub there?
It's felt just in terms of looking at our population. So having a space within a town centre and where there's good transport links will actually help in terms of the transport budget and the overall access for young people. And we've certainly, in terms of looking at the numbers, there's a paper that will be coming to executive.
So we haven't done what we did with the movement of the Borough Council and said it's got to be in Wokingham, it's got to be an existing. You've actually gone through all the options.
It's a kind of an assessment of what we need, and then looking for an opportunity to provide that in the most cost-effective way. I think that's and there will be it'll be coming out quite well next couple of months, 3 months, 4 months, something like that. Yep, there will be. It's being worked up at the moment.
And I've just got a couple more questions. You've got secondary school basic needs programme, but what I couldn't understand why it was capital and why it was only 1 year.
How do you mean?
Page 40.
Right. Yes.
Why isn't that revenue? Sort of basic needs sounds like something that's revenue-ish, and yet it's only 1 year.
No, basic need is for capital. The government gives us, or suggests to us, although this is coming out of the general fund. I think this was the decisions that we made when we decided we had to expand the secondary schools to meet the bulge that was coming through. So some of that work is already over, and this is what's left. Pigott is the last one. So we finished St Crispin's. We finished.
Okay. So the reason it's only 25, 26 is you think you're not going to need it again.
Yeah. Well, yes.
And sorry about this.
That's all right. Keep going.
Again, same question on care leaver accommodation, including Seaford Court. Is that again a capital improvement rather than a ongoing cost?
Yes. It's all of this is to build the stuff. It's not to run any of it.
Okay. And I think, apart from some very detailed questions on the business case, I think that's me, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll do the business case ones at the end, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Caroline.
Hello, thank you. You talked about social workers and you're improving them. Are we losing the same amount? Or, sorry.
In terms of retention rates, so no, that looks to have slowed. There was a peak about this time last year in terms of social workers, but no, we're recruiting and we are retaining our social workers.
And in some cases, even converting some from...
We've converted some long-standing locums to wanting to belong to Wokingham, so that's really positive.
Yep.
Pauline.
At some point, I want everybody else to have a go first, but can I ask the detailed business case questions on the pages with the tables on them at some point?
Any other questions on the first 20 or so pages up to page 41? Moses, I'm so sorry.
I'm looking at page 34. The growth looks like the trend I would expect in terms of percentage increases. So if I assume that the growth is pessimistic and the savings are optimistic, what will be the likely impact on the services and the council finances if the savings are not achieved?
I think
Well, I would say we wouldn't put them in there if we didn't think there was a good probability that we would achieve them. Because a lot of the work we're doing at the moment is front-loading work in order to be able to deliver things in a better, more cost-effective way. And so we've got a sort of hump to get over, and then things should start improving. So we think that's a realistic expectation from the work that we're doing now to reduce the upward pressure. Is that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm asking the question because there's speculation that with the VAT on private schools, most people may move from the private sector to the state school. So has this MTFP accounted for that likelihood?
yes. So we have looked at the numbers, and we are in terms of anticipating the potential impact. We're not anticipating that would increase pressure significantly on our state schools.
It doesn't mean we're anticipating nothing,
No.
but we think that it's been looked at and they think it's manageable.
Certainly within our primary schools, we have capacity to meet those needs. We have, on average, about 100 places that are subscribed to within our secondary school places, but then they are not taken up as children will go, and we've got capacity to meet that need going forward from what our current assessment is, but it's something that we are constantly reviewing.
Just one last question on page 36.
Sorry, Catherine, was it on that specific point?
It was, yes. I understand that some children who go to private schools go there because they've got special needs. So has that been taken into consideration?
You mean the parents opt for them to go
They
there?
opt because of smaller classes and things like that. Not necessarily special needs support, but just the fact that the classes are smaller.
In fact, there was a lady on the radio only yesterday morning talking about a school. I think she was from Ascot, so not one of our residents. Talking about how she had opted for this for her daughter and then was thinking, how can she afford it? It's quite hard to quantify that.
It is hard to quantify that, but but again, it's something we do have details about children's needs linked to their EHCP. So those children that we are aware of in terms of EHCPs, but there is there will be a number of children who are subject to SEN support that we won't have the details of their plans in terms of numbers, in terms of those that may be in the private sector.
Yeah, well, the one that I'm thinking of in particular, they have it done privately as well. They have the EHCP done privately, so you won't know anything about it, probably.
Yeah. They might have had an assessment.
But they can't have an EHCP.
Okay, an assessment, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, page 36. I'm just wondering why the home to school transport, the significant jump from 277 to 655.
Now, remember that's cumulative again, so it's roughly a little bit over doubling. That's to do with increasing numbers of children and increasing cost of the transport. There's all sorts of assumptions in there, isn't there?
There are all sorts of assumptions, but as we said earlier, over the past 5 years. There's been a doubling in the number of children for whom we have a duty in relation to their transport linked to their EHCPs, and that factors in that growth. There's also associated costs just in terms of fuel and things that can be quite challenging to anticipate and forecast. So having a realistic, at least it being factored in terms of those rising costs, we think is sensible.
Yeah, I would think that probably David and Caroline, maybe Pauline, will remember that homeschool transport costs were regularly underestimated for years and years and years, and it's only recently that the budget's been increased by 93%, I think, since 2019 or something like that, and it's only really this year that we are able really to predict what the home to school transport should be, because we haven't had the systems in place that say we've allocated this child to this school and that doesn't automatically feed into they need the transport for this, but we're getting on top of that now, so it's much more rigorous, so we've got a much better idea of what it will be like. That's I'm very nervous about saying it's entirely accurate, because history suggests that it's more complicated than you think.
Martin, and then Dave.
Yeah, just a quick one, really. It's interesting to see this upward trend in numbers. The children demography, there's little humps, but it's basically not increasing that much. So this is a disproportionate increase. Who's talking about doubling? And the question that comes to my mind is, what's the root cause of that? Because if we can't identify the root cause, we're kind of just fixing the symptoms of maybe something that is just deeper. And is anybody doing any research into why does this change nationally?
Do you mean the increase in send, or do you?
There's just an increased send. Yes. The whole increase in that provision. Yes. Is it that we're just better at identifying it, or is there actually an increase that we need to be concerned about for other reasons? So I think it's nothing, and it's not really within the council's issue, but I just wondered from that point of view.
The reasons are many and varied, and it's fair to say that responding to children with additional needs is not just the responsibility of local authorities, it's the responsibility of a local area. I think there are multiple reasons for children registering with additional needs. Some of them are system and structural issues. I think in relation to the way in which changes to education policy and the way in which schools are able to make what you and I might think are reasonable adjustments for children, but then requiring a plan to do so. And I think there has also been a reduction in what support families and children could access as ordinarily available, both in terms of speech and groups that parents could access in the early years in terms of speech and language development. And then we also on top of that had COVID and the pandemic, and I think the results for our children have been kind of nationally noted. I think the impact, particularly in terms of children's mental health, and the growth in social media and some of the impact that's had on children and young people. So there are multiple reasons. Families moving away from networks of support, being traditionally maybe being able to access family support, and that not being available to families in the same way that it might have done previously. I could probably write an essay.
There's one extra factor, which is that Wokingham is behind the curve. And so that traditionally we've had very low levels of EHCPs compared to other parts of the country, and now our growth is catching up with the rest of the country. So our curve upwards is a bit steeper than quite a lot of authorities, but we're still below. And it's quite, it's, if only we knew, and I think that was one of the other things in the National Audit Office. They're basically saying the DfE doesn't know exactly what it should be doing about this or what the causes are, and it needs to be urgently sorted out. It was a very realistic report, I have to say.
Brutally honest.
Not very optimistic. Yeah, it was very, very, very honest.
Yes.
It sounds like as usual, there is no silver bullet, but there's lots of bullets which perhaps would have been better noticed earlier on, and consequences of some policies have now come back to bite us, and they weren't necessarily big savings at all. I think the good one was the research into the results of the gosh, it's just slipped my mind now. Just recently, it was the Sure Start scheme, the impact of Sure Start, which my other half is an educationist, was what it was going to do was very positive, and people doubted it who weren't necessarily in the field, and now the evidence has come out. It's had an amazing impact and saved a lot of money.
And what is very sad is that COVID did almost exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Of what is
Undid it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those children had less than any other generation. It's showing in their developmental targets and the number of children we're having to support at an ever younger age. It's really very tragic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good example. You invest to save.
I'm going to keep us moving forward. Dave has been waiting for a question online, patiently. Says
yes, I just wanted to ask about bow hunt and the provision of a sixth form there. I didn't see anything in the budget relating to that.
It's in the secondary school capital.
And how much has been allocated for that?
No, it's quite a lot of that money. But we can find out the exact figures.
I would need to get get the specifics, and I can provide you that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pauline.
Before I get on to the business case questions, a couple of questions. Just talking about home to school transport. Last year, I think we made a few painful changes to the home to school transport policy, or at least maybe not painful, but certainly brave. Have we seen any benefit of those, do you think?
I think it's early days, but we are. I think we're seeing some of the benefit of those changes, both for children and young people, but also for the financial sustainability of that of our home to school transport budget. So I spoke a bit about those earlier in terms of personal travel budgets, also the travel assistance programme in terms of training and supporting children, young people in accessing public transport, and some of the early indicators from that have been quite transformational. And we will be bringing some of those case studies forward in terms of just highlighting.
It'd be interesting to see the figures behind that, I think.
It's coming to Children's Overview and Scrutiny in January.
I'll have to keep an eye out for it.
Yes.
Maybe it'll come along. And just going back to EHCPs, it is part of the issue with all of this that for whatever reason, EHCPs became the way that you could get help. And actually, it would have been a lot cheaper and easier to just give people the help they needed without the EHCP. So you've sort of created your own problem in that you've pushed people into that as a solution, which then brings other costs.
I think
it's the government. I'm not talking about us.
No, and that's the position we're trying to get into now, is to provide that early help to
it's much more sensible.
Yes. Well, it seems eminently sensible to us. So that's what we're trying to do. Yes.
So I just wonder if that's part of the unintended consequences of trying to put a structure and an assessment behind things.
It absolutely is that. Yeah. Okay.
So not every government gets everything right. I am criticising my own side. Thank you.
I just had one before we finally move on for Pauline to have her say on the business cases. It was a general call out on page, I think it's 37, special items, BI and PM infrastructure. Is this, I just want to double check, this isn't one department doing Power BI on its own, this is our contribution to the council-wide. Just wanted to ask. It's fine, just wanted to ask. I've seen it too many times in other places where...
Services are a big share of the ask.
I've just seen it too many times over the years of one department going, we're doing that as well, and you just...
Definitely looking at it as a system. Yep.
Right. Are we all done on those pages? Last chance. Dave's got a legacy hand up, I'm assuming. On to the business cases themselves. I don't necessarily propose that we go through every single page of every single business case. We'll be here till kingdom come. I would suggest if there are specific points that officers and our exec colleagues would like to make, and then what I would suggest as we go round the room, if there are specific business cases that members want to talk about, that we kind of go through those and try and keep them in page order. And again, given the volume of information in here, if we can be really succinct and also reference the pages we're looking at, not just the name of the business case. So is there anything from colleagues to my left, Matt or Emma, or from David or Prue? Okay. Pauline, over to you.
Okay, there are not that many questions, honestly. Page 43, just to make sure I understand what I'm looking at. When you've got expenditure in red with brackets, is that income or is it actually expenditure? So if you say bracket 100,000 as expenditure, is that actually a reduction in expenditure, or is it 100,000 increase?
It's a saving. Yeah, so it's a reduction.
It's a saving. Okay, great.
So it says expenditure, and then it says in brackets, but that's the saving, the business case to deliver.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I understood what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Second question was, and this is a bit picky, so if you've got a continuation of a budget which has got 800,000 income, which is negative, which I thought was a bit strange, on page 44. So what's a negative income? I think that should be positive, shouldn't it?
It is positive for me and my budget. Yes.
I'm not sure it should be in brackets in red, but I'll take your advice on it.
Well, all I would say is the effect on the budget is positive because it was just before the financial year, the government increased the social care grant, so it was treated as an income. Mm. So it is a positive benefit to the budget. I suppose having it as a continuation as a saving was a accountant's decision about
looks
how
a bit
to
strange to
represent
me.
it
That's all.
in there.
You would have thought. Well, yeah, it just looks odd. Maybe we can get advice from an accountant about why an income is a negative figure when it's positive.
It's also saying it isn't absolutely certain that we'll get it this year.
It is, but I accept your point, Pauline, but it was agreed to show it that way. So.
Maybe could we just ask the finance guys just so we understand what we're looking at?
Yeah.
And then in that case, why is the 24-25 figure 0? It should be something, surely.
Because we're not sure that it's going to continue.
No, 24-20. So you've got.
We've got it 24-25. So
yeah, so it shouldn't be 0.
It shouldn't be 0. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And the okay, that one's all right. Now I understand what red means. Give me a second. That's the same. That's the same. think that might be about it, actually. Just let me keep... Sorry, I'm trying to do this electronically. I'm failing miserably. Yeah, some of them have a bit short on timelines. I'm looking at page 53. There's a bit. It's a bit short of information. And likewise, we already talked about Suffolk Lodge, but it'd be good to see the investment appraisal, because it isn't there on page 53.
So 53 is a capital bid.
Yeah.
For refurbishment of Suffolk Lodge.
Yeah. So there's no dates at all?
No, I think that's just because they're to come, I would say.
Okay.
In that sometimes we're in the process of needing to get a bid in, but some of that detail then needs to follow from our property colleagues in terms of what exactly is going to be refurbished.
Sorry, but just on that point, where it's got 2-point-something million, sorry, can't read that, 207 million of a capital bid, this is for 25-26, so we're saying that there is more detail to come on that, but we are going to spend the 207 in that 1 year, or
no,
this is a capital bid?
It's in 2 years.
It
is over 2 years.
It's quite a detailed business case to have no indication of dates in it, bearing in mind you've got very detailed costs.
No, 25-26.
Well, I think that can come from our property.
That will come from property
colleagues. Yeah.
But you need that to be able to understand whether to do it or not, don't you? Because you need to understand when the benefit... So, is this something we have to do?
Everything has got to be done to make it a decent place to live.
So it's not a invest to save, it's running costs, is it really?
Well,
it's invest to save, because if we don't do it, we won't be able to use the house.
Yeah.
The home.
That's running costs to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dilapidations, or I don't know. It's keeping the roof on.
Okay.
Correct. It's that.
And then on page 55, there are no costs and savings on there either. So I think you've got some bits of your business cases missing. Yeah. Yeah. So there's no cost to capital? That sounds very unlikely. So if we're spending...
For the Suffolk Lodge refurbishment, it's a capital, so we haven't got...
But, so where's the capital coming from?
I think you're right. So it's not it's not a business case like totality of a purchase and payback. But I think your point is right. Shouldn't there be something in there in terms of the paying back of that capital?
Yeah.
So I think that can be looked at.
So I think what I'd like on that, and I think we need to pick this up in some of the reporting back at the end, is on that one, I don't have a problem with the principle of it, but I think there's a lot more detail.
I think I'd like to see a proper business case completed.
I'd like to see more over time, but I think the principle of the development, the principle of the spend, I don't have an issue with the principle of the spend. But I think there's more work that's needed to be able to kind of tick the box when it comes to the full.
Yeah, and I think honestly, part of that's my fault in that this was planned for later, and I said I want it done, stick it in, and I want it done earlier, because if we're going to refurbish, let's get the benefit of that earlier. So we can certainly come back with a bit more in there a bit later in the cycle. I think that's all right.
Yeah, and page 62. Why has it only got 1 year in there of figures? Is that just that we're saving 500,000 a year and that's it? Is this another one of these cumulative figures that...
No, let me just go back and look at... It doesn't match, I don't think. I think it's a mistake that it should be in each year. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and page... No. So, page... sorry, these things are going slightly over the end of the pages, which doesn't help very much. The home to school transport ones, I thought the new SEND schools and policy changes were meant to reduce the costs, and yet you're not showing any benefit in any of the 3 years. Is that just because you don't know yet?
Yes.
Yes.
So that all needs to be modelled and factored in. And I guess we're not entirely certain when the, in terms of the timeframes for the 2 free schools that are being proposed by the DfE.
Yeah, I understand that. I just, there seems to be a bit of, with these business cases, you know, this is going to save us money, but we're a bit unclear about the end point. So we've bought one care home, but we haven't seen the full benefit of that yet. We're about to refurbish another one, but we haven't seen the full benefit. We've got 2 SEND schools which were promised to give us benefit, but we haven't seen...
What do you expect, Pauline? They're in the future.
Well, business cases are always in the future. You have to estimate it, because otherwise you don't spend money. Otherwise you spend money on a wish. I'm not saying it needs to be accurate. What I'm saying, it needs to be your best estimate.
It is.
It is. Well, I think that was an error, wasn't it?
The homeschool transport should be the 500,000 continuing. Yep.
And the SEND schools with no benefits?
Well,
I think it depends, again, there's a lot of variables within that, so it depends on the size, the size of the community that we can put in.
Where the children come from that go to it, and what...
But I think, I mean, if I...
it at this stage.
I know we're not spending the money on the SEND schools, so it's slightly different in that it's not our expenditure, but someone somewhere will have said, presumably, we're going to spend X million pounds on these things that we expect them to save Y. And the X is there, but not the Y potential.
That's in the safety valve.
Okay.
So we can make sure that that's in the report about the safety valve, because that is factored in, but I wouldn't be able to pluck those.
No, it's all right. I don't expect you to pluck the figures out.
Sorry.
And I think it's the same with the care homes. I think if you're going to spend money on stuff, it's, you know, you need to have an estimate of what the benefit's going to be, and then at the end of it, you need to check what you actually achieved against what you thought it was going to be. That's all.
Yeah.
Yes, we have the business case for the purchase of that we said we'd share, so we can do that. And the assumptions around all of that in terms of growth and savings is inclusive in the MTFP.
Thank you, and you'll be pleased that's the last question.
Martin.
I think from the reports in the business papers, I think the reports in the business press in recent times have suggested it would be very hard not to make savings running your own care home, because the profit margins of about 25% give you pretty good scope to cope with that, doesn't it? I mean, the private providers in care homes are reported to be making profit margins of around 25%. So it wouldn't take very much for us to beat that.
The base. Well, because they're in so much debt, basically.
Yes. If I can make a point about the free schools, the National Audit Office, again, that same report, estimates that having a child in an independent school costs about £61,500 a year, and having them in a state special school is about 20. I was going to say, yes, I was going to say 20, and then I had a doubt in myself. But no, it's about 20. So it's a third of the cost, basically. So it's very hard not to make savings. So that on the other side, that's why we're doing our own children's homes, because the placements, as you will have seen in that horrible growth budget, the placement cost is enormous, and we can control some of that and also control the quality, because I think the same issue with care homes, that they're run by private companies, and children's homes are run by venture capitalists and all sorts of people who want to take a profit out of it. And we don't need a profit. We need them not to cost us huge arms and legs of money that we don't have as a local authority.
That money reinvested in children.
Yeah, reinvest it in children. But also, because if people are motivated by money in this, the quality of the care is not always what you would like. And the cases that we've seen of things, I remember going to the conference last year where they were talking about the case in Yorkshire somewhere, I can't remember the name of the home, awful stuff. And because those children are so far away from you, it's very difficult to check on their welfare, and really
So to be clear, Kate, that's the sort of information I was after.
Yes, right.
Yeah?
Okay.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea at all.
No.
I'm just trying to understand the dynamics of it, both in soft business case and hard business case.
A lot. There is an awful lot in the Safety Valve programme about the impact of all the different work streams that we've got, and trying to work out where that is. And yeah, how many pages does the spreadsheet we have to send to the DFE have? 30-something?
Yeah.
30-something spreadsheets each third of a year.
Mary-Louise, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, it is just going on from that. It is notoriously difficult to quantify the benefits of a shift from a reactive to a preventative approach to solving these problems. And I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I'm saying that historically it is extremely, we need to recognise that it is extremely difficult. It also depends about the time you are willing, that you want to look at. Because every time I see the cost, not here, but the ones for Bluebell, I remember that was a council home, which was, so it has gone through this amazing cycle of having been built, sold, rebought. And I would be very interested to know sort of like how much cumulatively all that has cost us. I'm not suggesting that we do, because it wouldn't be a valuable use of your time or money, but I think it would be an interesting, because that would give you an idea of what this whole cycle of, privatisation, financialisation, failure, and then, bringing it back inside has actually cost. But like in terms of methodology, it's very easy to say, we want cost-benefit analysis, we want a value for money metric, but historically and methodologically, it is accepted that it is quite difficult in these. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try, but it has to be done with an awareness that it is quite difficult. I don't think anyone's saying that we should.
Microphones, please. Caroline.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a question on page 84, right to the end. It's
Subtly.
Yeah, well, no, because some of the questions I was going to ask have been answered, so that's great. It's on funding identified. It says you're going to ask towns and parish contributions. Yeah, and it's on funding identified. Is that if the accommodation is actually in their parish or town, or is it just general, we'll ask for some money to help out with the project? On page 84, halfway down, you've got funding identified. What sources of funding have been investigated and the outcomes? You've got external grants, towns and parish county.
No, that's EG.
That's the EG.
Oh.
We haven't filled in anything. That's
It's just I saw the bit about towns and parish contributions and I got quite twitchy. Yeah, well, absolutely, because I know what our budget's like in early. Do apologise.
I was starting to panic.
Yes, I was thinking, what are we saying?
Yeah.
Let's not open that door.
No.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Oh.
Moving on. Any more for questions? Moses.
It's not a question, it's an observation. I think there's some missing text on page 48 and 50.
Sorry, apologies. Was that 48 and 50?
50, yeah. Where it says 48, it says with their In other words, it's an incomplete statement. On page 48, under description and link to service plan, those requiring support with the
It's by the looks like it's just cut the line off, or it hasn't
Yeah.
expanded the boxes.
Oh, I see.
The line comes out.
Is it something to do with the PDF format?
I
So
think it's
based this,
mod
expect to
gov.
rise the number of older
Yeah.
people, those requiring support with their.
I think David's looking at it as a PDF, and if you're looking at it ModGov, it's exactly the same as in the agenda. It's cut it off.
Yeah, so it's truncated
I'm looking
text.
at
I think.
Amagov, yeah.
It is there.
Yeah, but it's not
It's not in ModGov.
it's not here and it's not mod.gov. So I think what are the missing words? hang on. Shh.
If you read out to where, because I haven't got view of what you can't see.
So it
if you
says
read out-
so that description links to service plan. The last bit says based on this, an expected rise in the number of older people, those requiring support with their,
I can't.
and then
I
it
can't-
cuts it.
Which box is that?
Is that page 48?
Descriptions and links to service plan.
Yes. Oh, I don't know if I... Yeah. No, it doesn't. I haven't got the... I haven't got the bit of it.
No,
No.
we're looking at a different page.
Yeah,
So that's
sorry.
just a error in the moving of the text into here. So we need to get the rest of that text
Sorry.
added in. What number's that?
Page 48.
86. Oh no.
ASCR
48 on here, but when I go back and go back, it will
R6.
be the PID number, won't it?
Yeah, it's ASC.R6.
R6.
And you said on page 50 as well?
50 box, 40 box where it says in regards to.
Yes,
That's
that's
at the end.
Yeah, that's R8. Yes, and that's the middle bit.
52.
good catch.
We invest additional funds in ensuring that we can meet our statutory requirements in regards to, I presume that's deprivation of liberty. Page 50.
Right. Oh, I thought it said 52.
Sorry. There.
Okay.
So I think if those can get fixed before the final packs go for.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened there in the.
Yeah. Thank you.
We didn't simply just run out of steam there.
Somewhere, I just can't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more for any more? Okay, just so as we move off those big block of items,
Can I just...
yeah, go ahead.
So I was just going to clarify, during the meeting we had 4 items that we wanted clarification on. I just want to check that we've got them all correct. I've got one from Pauline, which we would like a business case for Bluebell. There was a list of projects and the savings to provide.
Yep, got that.
Thank you. We got a safety valve. We'd like a sheet on that. And thank you. And we also got a proper business case for Suffolk Lodge. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all right. Was
So
that
we-
any I missed? that
We
you
also had a
requested?
couple of other things. How much does bow hunt cost for the sixth form?
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I was just going to say that, yeah.
And
Thank
there's a
you.
mistake in the home to school transport thing with the savings
That
not
just
carried
needs to
across.
be corrected.
Yep.
Okay,
So that's
thank
the
you.
list of the kind of the actions that come from this, with a couple
Yeah.
of the missing bits of text and everything else. What I would just like to try and do, if there's nothing else to add or comment on this specifically, is just the kind of the consolidated view that we want to pass back as feedback on this budget from this scrutiny committee. the specific comments that people want to make? Do we proceed on the basis that we're acknowledging and accepting? Where do people want to put this through? We need to give feedback into the process from here on in. What feedback would the committee like to submit as part of that? Pauline.
Well, I think we don't generally approve or deny cases. It's down to executive what they do. So we don't comment necessarily on the strategy. I think we should thank the officers and the councillors for a pretty thorough set of documentation. There's a few little tweaks, there's a few bits of extra information, but it was very informative, and I think, you know, there's some good stuff going on. Is my summary of it all, if that helps?
No, I agreed. I wasn't asking for us to approve or reject the budget. It's more, this committee has discussed this in great detail with some excellent presentations, thank you, and the opinion of the committee passing through to the next stage is X, Y, and Z, as opposed to approving. But it's looking for that sense of direction from the committee to give feedback as a result from the report. Mary-Louise.
Sorry, in relation to that, I did have one thing which, you know, we all know, which is to do with the oversight rather than the scrutiny, which is, as I always say, when we look at the risk, the first page of all of these things always makes my heart stop a bit, because we're not talking about risks so much as certainty of disaster. Yeah, in that you know, some of these issues, or no, the core of these issues are structural. Yeah, they are around not just problems with the SEND programme, but the way in which, you know, the statutory responsibility for so much has been, you know, rolled down onto local government without any accompanying ability to change national policy or even affect national policy, and also raise funding for it. So I think I always feel, you know, while absolutely acknowledging, you know, the work and, you know, the imagination that has to be used, we do have like a structural problem here, and which cannot be solved by short-term, I'm not criticising there, but, you know, interventions and changes. It does sometimes feel like we are rearranging deck chairs on something which is going down, and I just don't know where that awareness comes out in our recommendations, or understanding that, you know, this is not going to solve the problem so much as like stave off disaster. That, I mean, we saw Hampshire, for example, just this week. You know, they're now on 83% of their budget is being spent on adult and children's social care, and, you know, and there's the one thing that it simply cannot work, soon is going to collapse, but there's also the kind of democratic deficit issue, isn't there, that councils are turning into social care funding agencies with a lawnmower, yeah, and that's not what the residents think that they're voting for or paying for. So I just don't know where that goes. You know, I'm not expecting everyone to agree, but I think there has to be some awareness that these risks are, you know, more than we can, you know, when you look at a risk analysis, you kind of judge a programme by how it addresses those risks. But some of these risks can't be addressed here.
I think that's the key part, is that all we can do is look at, judge and consider the budget with the money that we currently have. Yeah. I think when you look at everything else in the National Audit Office report on SEN, there are so many things that have needing to be fixed that kind of all interlink and intermesh. I was going to say it earlier on, but in our little kind of circle of SEN families, we see more and more people are coming down the EHCP route because they can't get the support in the schools, because the schools' budgets are squeezed because of X, Y, and Z, therefore the school won't support it, therefore you present elsewhere. And there is that piece, there is this piece around early intervention and just spend the money, but there isn't the money to spend. So how do you do it? You can't do that. Wokingham can't do that on its own. Hampshire can't do it on its own, but you are you are right. I think there's a lot of this is the national fundamental questions that will need to be addressed and answered, and that's going to take time. But I hear your point.
Sorry, time and honesty.
Yes.
And, you know, a collective understanding of what the problem is. Yeah, because we can't.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. So that's sort of like where from the ground up, and not just from individual kind of you know stroppy councillors, but from a council saying that this cannot be.
Pauline, and then we'll move on.
That just reminded me of something that I wanted to ask, didn't ask, and it would be useful to have somewhere in the actions if everybody else agrees. On the way through, we talked about the difficulty of getting money out of the NHS to actually help them reduce their costs, which is what we're doing. And I'm just wondering what we're doing about that, and whether there's anything more we can do that we're not doing. Does that make sense, Matt?
I don't think we could do an awful lot more, but Matt can tell you.
Well, we've done an awful lot in terms of case by case. Emma's done an awful lot in terms of setting up the panel infrastructure and process for that. We've written and progress is being made. But it's ongoing, I suppose, rather than what more can we do. It's just keeping going with that.
It comes back to Mary-Louise's comment about structural changes. I think it's another area where we need some structural change, where people think of the total cost to the taxpayer rather than whose bucket it's in, and actually does what's right for the patient and right for the taxpayer.
I completely agree. So, the government's talking about a 10-year NHS plan. Should be a 10-year NHS and care
Precisely.
Plan. And if we're talking about hospital, because there are 3 big shifts, aren't there? Hospital to community, sickness to prevention, then that needs to be thought about in terms of social care, definitely, but also housing and employment and the things that keep people well.
So I just thought it'd be useful to maybe reflect that in the conclusions, on the hope that somebody who has got some influence on this stuff actually reads actually takes on board some of the issues, because there are some issues around about things being, I think, in too many buckets and not looking at the holistic picture. And it's not a political point. I think it's common sense. But
I was going to say, is that less of an us thing, more of a national piece?
Absolutely a national piece. I feel comforted that Matt and his colleagues have actually got their hands around this, because actually we could be in a lot worse state.
Okay, so I think with the comments and the items that we've raised this evening, the truncated pieces of text, with the other actions that have come up, I just hope, with everything else that's been raised, I think if we're happy with those blocks, I think nothing else, that would be for us then to note this budget and pass it forward, and to thank you for your attendance. And actually, I have to say, I've been through this a number of times. That's probably the succinctest way of kind of presenting it and getting the top level detail done. So I think whilst, learning process, and I think there's still some things we need to pick up on, I think it was a really good update. And as I say, apologies for running out at the start of it. It wasn't fear.
As long as you're all right.
No, I'm fine, as I say, just learning to live with change. But thank you. And you are more than welcome to stay for the rest. Right, moving on. 2 items to go. Work programme 109. Page 109. 109 in the pack. Questions, comments, thoughts? Thank you for getting that tidied up and represented. Pauline.
Just a quick question. Playing pitch strategy, is that really November? I don't think it is.
That is when it's currently meant to be going, and when I've been advised by officers most recently.
Can we go around that loop again, because I don't think that's correct? Maybe it is. Maybe it's...
I'll check with the officers, but that was the most recent information I was
So,
given.
so I've been copied in on some of the emails, and I think that's as good a date. It is firm to expect it to appear with us on the 26th of November, having also asked the same question. I think what I would say, this is probably back for George and co, is where we think there's even the possibility that something isn't going to make it through, that given especially the two November meetings are going to be pretty brutal, if there's a suggestion that something isn't going to come through, then let's get it removed and moved around as necessary, because I can see that 26th of November meeting is pretty full, and we still have to go through on the 12th of November a couple of very large topics in there as well, the least of which is the place and growth budget. So I think if we get, that will be my feedback from this, if everyone is in agreement. And yes, I did check on the playing pitch strategy for that same reason. It's an important piece of work we just need to get through to us. Anything else to add on the work programme that doesn't involve adding anything to it? Okay, thank you very much. So that's easier. And then finally, agenda item 43, the action tracker. Pauline.
Thank you. At the risk of having the wrong scrutiny meeting, because that has happened more than once, what happened to the action on reviewing the strategy for funding and assets for voluntary bodies and its alignment with the council priorities? Is that this committee or is it management? I can never remember.
I think it's management.
Thank you. Okay, I have got the wrong one again. And the second question was Simondale provided, sorry, page 116. Simondale provided details of the hierarchy of current meetings between housing companies and WPC officers in the executive report. And this issue of opposition members being substituted at shareholder committees to be looked at. It says completed. What was the conclusion?
I will check with Simondale. I have recently contacted him, and because there's also he's going to provide a verbal update on all of the actions, as far as I'm aware.
Thank you.
Sorry, anyhow, I'm doing it now. I was going to ask about the planning report, but I think I've seen that's been sent round to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's it. Oh, just over 2 hours. Right. Anything else? If not, we shall close this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Thanks, Dave.
Safe journey home, everyone.